Good morning, and welcome to this next session, Insights for Navigating the CISO Career Path and Beyond. My name is Tina Thorstensen, Executive Public Sector Strategist with CrowdStrike. In today's session, we're going to cover a number of things, but first I'm going to define the Chief Information Security Officer role for the audience here today, and then I'm going to go into a little bit of my career path. And then I asked some friends and colleagues to share their experiences. So we're going to dive through quite a number of things here in the next few minutes. So hang in there with me. So as we're defining the security officer role, it's really evolved over the last decade, even more. And the core components are technology related, and that's where many people believe it starts and stops, but there's so much more. There's a people component, embracing the culture of the organization that you work within, and also a process component, this continuous improvement model that is important for many career paths and many executive leadership experiences, but it's particularly critical in this one. From the core technology piece, essentially, we work across all layers of technology infrastructure. From the people and culture piece, it's important to align with the culture and not implement changes that disrupt the business or the institution, but also that bring value, right? That drive innovation. And that requires being closely connected to the culture of your organization. And then the process piece, it goes all over the map, from organizing people around program activities, organizing technology improvements and enhancements along the, whether it's operational efficiency and alignment or innovation. So as we go into this a little bit further, I love focusing just a moment on the culture, because it's so important as an executive, especially in the information security space. And this is a quote from a friend of mine, Michael Duff, CISO at Stanford University. And he says, one of the pillars of our team culture is transparency, and this openness builds trust. And this is something that works really well in the higher education framing. And the important thing to note here is that it's important for each security officer within their own organization to know what helps build trust. And certainly trust and transparency frequently go hand in hand, especially in the higher education segment. Okay, so next, let's take a quick glance at my career path. And I'll be straight up with you. I don't even believe that the security officer career path existed when I was in school. If it did, I had no idea about it. I started, my initial passion was gymnastics, did that through high school and into college. My first career after receiving my degree from Virginia Tech was as an industrial engineer at overnight transportation that's long since been bought out by UPS. And then I fell into higher education, moved to Arizona from Virginia, and really fell in love with technology at that point, and implementing new systems, enterprise systems that impacted an entire university, and fell in love with university culture. Progressed through a series of career paths, ultimately became the deputy CIO and CISO for Arizona State University. Switching universities, and the climate between the mountains of northern Arizona and the desert of Phoenix was dramatic, as was the culture between the two institutions. And then last year, in August of 2020, I launched a new career as an executive strategist with CrowdStrike after about 28 years of operational experience, many of those focused in the security space. So as we look at a couple of examples of programs of activity in cybersecurity, information security awareness is a key component. For any of you that have had internships and things, there's a really good chance that you've had to take some information security training along the way. You've seen some posters around campus, maybe, for how to protect yourself and the organization that you work at, maybe. Then there's privacy components. That's a growing area where at the very least, the security officers partner with the privacy teams. In my case, I was one of the leaders of the privacy initiatives and really the key driver in making sure that we continue to meet the privacy requirements of not only faculty and staff, but also students and the rest of the constituents in our community. Then there's identity and access, how you get people in and out of services at a large university is not a simple task, as we'll talk a little bit more about as we go here. And then there's technology audits. No one loves audits. No one loves assessments, external teams coming in to review your progress or your activity or your maturity, but they're a necessary component in this space, and certainly can and do generally take quite a bit of time. Then there's IT policy and governance, everything from what the rules of the road are for an institution or an organization, kind of the do's and don'ts of faculty, staff, students in a higher education setting, or staff in many other sectors, and what you need to do to connect devices or get set up with these kinds of services, or what you do when you travel for business. And then the last is IT governance and alignment. And this, I had the opportunity of leading my last couple of years with Arizona State University. And in this space, you get to embed security in every initiative across the organization. And it was so much fun to see new, innovative things launch with security embedded from the start. That was the goal across the way. It's just more challenging, maybe even than it sounds, to actually execute in a real live operational environment. So how do security officers organize their teams? It can happen in a variety of ways, but there are key teams that generally support the initiatives that I just mentioned on the previous slide. And those teams are IT governance teams, and those are broad teams across, in my case, the university. Information security awareness teams, those tend to be direct reports through a manager or director to the security officer. Identity and access management teams, controlling how individuals get in and out of enterprise systems, whether it's applying to school, whether it's a faculty researcher who needs to travel or has certain security requirements for their research funding, or whether it's a staff member in the financial services area that needs access to enterprise financial systems. All of those things are generally organized within the security officer's domain, if not a direct report. Security operations, keeping all those systems running, not just enterprise applications, but network infrastructures, firewall infrastructures, all those layers that we now know as two-factor authentication, for example, play into that picture. And then there are architecture teams, and the architects are so important. There are security architects, and then there tend to be, any larger enterprise environment, there tend to be architects also in the DevSecOps area. So in the development area, where we're providing new services, development teams building new code, to operational areas, especially in the network connectivity side, there's typically a lead architect there. And it really takes those three individuals to work closely together to make sure we're building services that are important, that are secure, and where all of our constituents have appropriate connectivity to reach those. All right, so a little bit about my CrowdStrike focus for this year. I thought it might be interesting to look at security from a slightly different angle. So in this session, in these next two slides, what I want to focus on are key things that every security officer who's a part of an organization needs to keep their services safe, their people safe. And basically what CrowdStrike does is we serve as an extension of the security team in many cases, not only just in products, but also in services, in that not just monitoring the activity that we see going on in the organization's environment, but also proactively taking steps to protect the organization. And we tend to call that management. So it goes everything from endpoint security that you see on the left to cloud security, as more and more systems are working in AWS or GCP or Azure. There is a requirement to appropriately secure those. IT operations, I've covered off on some of that, but where CrowdStrike plays is really bringing things like which systems are vulnerable today. There are 0 days announced frequently. So we have a number of things that fit into that space to really help streamline IT operations and to know what to prioritize from a risk perspective. Then moving into identity, making sure that that the people that are gaining access to the systems that are so important to an organization, we're monitoring those access points to make sure it's actually the people who security officers have provisioned to have that access, as opposed to an adversary, which we've seen again and again and again, especially in this last year. Intelligence, CrowdStrike was born in the endpoint and intelligence space, so we bring those components. And then workflow or automation, we're doing more and more in that space to help organizations work more efficiently than ever. So I thought I'd share a little bit of the CrowdStrike perspective to show how technology and security companies partner with organizations to provide that overarching security protection. And then one final note here, where CrowdStrike is going from a strategic perspective, because organizations are demanding it, is building out what we call Crowd XCR Alliance. And essentially this is taking the story beyond just an organization partnering with CrowdStrike to an organization partnering with CrowdStrike, where CrowdStrike is also partnering with other technology organizations, so that, me as the security officer at Arizona State University, we spent an enormous amount of time integrating systems together. And with alliances like this, the intent is that the technology companies are doing more of the integration so that the organizations purchasing those security solutions don't have to. All right, so this next segment, I've told you a little bit about my story. What I'm going to do here is drop my video for just the next few moments here so that you can see the full page here. Not so important on mine, but the next few, it'll be really important. So I got a degree from Virginia Tech, first job as an industrial engineer, and my journey to Chief Information Security highlights really came out of my initial role as an industrial engineer designing mobile applications for truck drivers and dock workers. And then I fell into higher education, where I just fell in love with overhauling enterprise services to make the enrollment process easier, to make the graduation process easier. When I was in school, you had to stand in line to get in classes. And I was part of overhauling all of those systems quite a number of years ago now to make sure that it could all happen remotely. And now, of course, we all do it from our living room. So moving on through a variety of technology areas. I spent quite a stint in the HR department across over a number of years, and really build up relationships across the organization, and ultimately was heavily recruited to take on the security lead role. So that's a little bit of my story. And what I asked each one of my friends and colleagues here to share is a top tip for students who maybe are interested in a cybersecurity role, maybe aspire to be a chief information security officer someday, maybe aspire to be an architect, maybe aspire to be the marketing teams or communications teams that are helping stitch together the communications that are so incredibly important. And my top tip is be curious and take some risks. And above all else, listen, far more than you speak. You'll get great ideas from the team around you. So another friend of mine, David Sherry, is the Chief Information Security Officer for Princeton University. And his first job was working for the U.S. Postal Service as a letter carrier. Interesting enough, right? He got his degrees while he was working full-time as an adult. And his journey to CISO highlights start in the very early 90s, where he was in entry-level management when computers and computing began to become pervasive, right? So for him, it was an issue of timing. He wasn't afraid to leave a steady job to join a managed security startup in 2000. He had a passion for security. He knew it at that point. And then he ultimately used that experience to catapult him into information security functions at a top 10 bank, and then finally to higher education, where he's been for quite a number of years now. And his tip is strive to be continually humble. And I think that's wonderful, wonderful advice. We all can learn, no matter how much experience we have in a particular area, there is always more to learn. Richard Beaver, Chief Information Security Officer for Duke University, also received his several degrees, has a number of certifications, and his temp job for PeachNet, the Research and Education Network for the state of Georgia, is where he got his start. He built up his developed architecture skills around Linux systems, and then was given growth opportunities. So he took advantage of opportunities to move up, realized he was quite the people person as well. And top tips for him, actually, he gave me two. The field of security is broad. If I leave you with nothing else, it's really important to know that how many different options there are in cybersecurity right now. There are just tens of thousands of jobs, and whatever area of interest, we've got something for you. And a bonus tip from him to check out the Tribe of Hackers. So I'll leave you with that. You'll have these slides afterwards to follow up on that and other things here. A couple more here. Debbie Blythe, her road to security officer and beyond is a little bit different. She graduated from Regis University. First job, B. Dalton bookseller. Interesting, right? And started out as a Unix system administrator, who then inherited responsibilities for firewalls, began studying those, began becoming more and more passionate about security, and asked to be transferred to the security team. She took a proactive step there and then was promoted after her leader left. So top tip for her is be open to new experiences and learning new skills. There's so much more on here, and I won't read you all of these, but again, you'll have them afterwards. Two more. David Seidel, who is now the Vice President for IT and Chief Information Officer at Miami University of Ohio, lists his educational background, and his journey to CISO highlights are, he ran the Notre Dame Information Security Program really early in his career, and helped build that security posture that's so important, and grew a lot in that time frame. Took over the team as an interim lead, and also has really loved the higher education technology group we call EDUCAUSE. It's a community of thousands of individuals to get together. And in fact, I'm in Philadelphia right now for the EDUCAUSE conference that's happening this week, where we can come together, share ideas, mentor, and then go on our way and reconvene again next year. So top two tips, he says, get hands-on internship experience, which I'm going to share at the end of this session, and also engage with your faculty. He sees that as a critical step, and so do I. Getting an internship that helps you figure out what you love more than some other areas. The things that I thought I might really like to do as a career, turned out to be different than what I thought early on. So then finally, Ed Hudson, who is the system-wide Chief Information Security Officer for Cal State University, a large, complex set of university in California, also received multiple degrees. First job as a police detective, who was one of the only guys with a computer at home, right? He was the call Ed for anything that came up that required any kind of security component, incident response, forensics, work like that. Journey to CISO highlights for him as a police detective who was the guy to call. He was hired into private sector for incident response and forensics, and then ultimately landed a career in higher education and really fell in love with what the higher education community sets out to do. Top tip for him: not everyone's a coder. Open your eyes to different roads that can take you where you want to be. All right, so as we wrap up this session, I wanted to leave you with a couple of quick points. First, deploying technology is the easy part. This role really requires strong communication skills. You gotta love being a people person to be a security officer. There are many roles within the security team that don't require that, but the security officer role most certainly does. And what you learn quickly is that this world is 24/7 by 365. There are always adversaries working to enter your systems and exfiltrate whatever they can to monetize. So it's important to really build partnerships with some of the best and the brightest. So I love this quote from Helen as we wrap this up. She's a former Ohio State University CISO, and she says, being the CISO of a large public university, not exactly a stroll in the park. And that is certainly an understatement. And just to share a little bit about that, she goes on to say, it's the size of a financial institution, has hospital, and all of these components really make it subject to almost any regulation in the industry. There's research going on across all different industry verticals, and it really makes it an exciting place to be. All right, so you heard me talk about internships, and I'm going to wrap up with this. CrowdStrike and every technology company and every higher education institution has internship programs, and I highly recommend that you consider getting started with us or with someone. And just to share the kinds of opportunities we have, they're in the intelligence space with our Falcon Complete team, where that's the team that comes in and strategically and surgically fixes issues that adversaries create in our customers' environment. Opportunities in professional services. We have a number of proactive and reactive services. Incident response for most is the least favorable part of the profession, but surprises happen, and it's really important to have organizations like CrowdStrike to come in and support you in that. Engineering, data science, IT, marketing, finance, HR. So you can see the internship options are endless, even for a company whose goal it is to stop breaches. A couple examples of recent interns who are part of the CrowdStrike family. And a quick link to our university recruiting website and also email, in case anyone listening in here is interested or has a friend who might be. So with that, it's a wrap. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen in on this session. I hope you have a great rest of the conference.